and obviously nobody wishes sort of financial harm to happen. I actually think it's a very useful psychological reckoning to have a reset or to kind of check egos, in my opinion. I think the crypto markets were so bullish in the last year or two that there was quite frankly hubris that was exhibited by leaders of the crypto community. Particularly, we saw the implosion of the Luna and UST protocols and stable coins, which were supposed to be pegged 1 to 1 to the US dollar. And so people saw it as a safe haven or refuge that you could keep your money and maybe even make 20% interest on the anchor protocol. That turned out not to be the case. USTD pegged from $1 to 10 cents, wiping out life savings of a lot of folks that were not crypto speculators. They were not gambling like most cryptocurrencies, assuming that they were going to make money. They were just trying to keep their money stable. And unfortunately, folks lost millions of dollars. And it is a complete tragedy, quite frankly, that happened. But there's kind of a recurring joke about when do you see the top of the market? When you see Uber drivers talking about getting rich, investing in cryptocurrencies, when you see kind of TikTok influencers making a living, shilling crypto, you start to get worried about the hubris that there's easy money to be made. There's never easy money to be made, quite frankly. If there is, and you don't know who the sucker is, then it's probably you. And I unfortunately think that was the case with the recent happenings in the crypto market. So I am obviously still bullish and personally a crypto investor. So I think the sector will rise again from the ashes as it did many times before. But it does wipe out the speculators, the passersby, the people who are looking to make a quick buck. And it's quite frankly needed. The analogy that I make is, if you grew up in Southern California, you realize that the real threat here is not earthquakes, but wildfires. And in nature, wildfires have a useful purpose. They, remove all the unnecessary brush and debris that's there, and they help replenish the ecosystem by, turning it into ash and fertilizer so that, nature can regrow and have rebirth. And I think, unfortunately, that's socially true as well. Whenever you see excess hubris, ego, quick money, and obviously even a lot of scams that are being perpetuated, you need great resets like this in order to wipe those folks out, return to a sense of sensibility and groundedness so that people can, make wiser investments and not such wild speculative investments with their life savings. Now, it is a tragedy. I hope that the leaders of the community do the right thing and try to restore, as much of the money as they possibly can, rather than continuing to speculate with some of these new proposals. I think the first thing that you should always do when you've done harm to other people is to just try to, focus on redemption, not trying to fix your own shit, but do right by the people that you've burned. Unfortunately, I don't think that's always being happening right now, but I hope it does happen. And for those who are kind of watching this, anyone who's been through multiple recessions before, have seen the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, 2001, saw the tech recession of 2008, 2009, and the crypto markets kind of implode in 2018, 2019. This is, their fourth essentially bust cycle that they've seen. And hopefully, you learn lessons, which is to make sure that you protect your principal if you're investing. When you see, investments reach new heights, at least, keep 20% lock away 20% of the gains so that you're not walking away with nothing, and use basic principles of investing so that you're making sure that you're financially sound and secure, and that you're not getting caught up in the gold rush mentality that makes millionaires overnight but also ruins a lot of people overnight. And it's sad to hear stories, I'm not sure if they're true or not, about people committing suicide as a result of this recent implosion in terms of life savings being wiped out. But assuming that's true, that's an unfortunate tragedy. And while, certainly we don't wish that upon anyone, especially as a mental health professional, the macro, not talking about any individuals, does need resetting every once in a while. So everyone who's listening and watching this, take this as a useful lesson that even if you made a lot of money, it's not because you're a genius. It doesn't take a genius to time a market. It's just a lot of luck. And so make sure that you're using sanity, groundedness, and fundamental, principles in the way that you maintain your financial health, because financial health is really part of psychological health as well. So that's this week's unpopular opinion. Let's get to our callers. So I'm gonna let you in one by one, and for the other two that are waiting, I'm gonna keep you on deck, and I appreciate your patience. Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How are you doing?
Good. Wow, I can't believe I'm with Dr. Cam, the
I appreciate
famous
it.
Dr. Cam, one on one. This is cool.
For sure. Well, this is why we do it. I love having relationships with the folks in our community and spending time with you.
Sure, nice to meet you.
Likewise.
I'm sure you saw my synopsis of what I'm here to talk about.
Yeah. Why don't I don't think others have though, so I'd love for you to talk about it out loud.
Sure, I actually have been on finasteride since I was 18. I
Mm-hmm.
already noticed terrible genes
Mm.
for hair loss. I was already noticing some thinning. And so I was on it for, um, until like December. I
Okay. And how
or
old are you now, by
November
the way?
22.
Okay, so you've been on
Sorry,
it for about
yes.
4 years.
Right. So about 4 years, and then
Your hair's
um,
great, by the way. So
right.
whether
I mean, like I still have it.
yeah, exactly.
So I went off of it. I hadn't been dealing with some health issues, which I had found out were from Accutane, which I don't need to get
Yeah.
into all that now. But it was mainly fatigue, and then I was just looking into all sorts of health things until I heard about PFS, post-finasteride syndrome that
Right.
people have, and some people were. So I got off of it, thinking that was my problem
Mm-hmm.
for a few months, and I noticed hair coming out. I still have it, but it was considerable thinning, like
Mm.
noticeable thinning. So, anyways, I got right back on it, and so mainly my question is: I know it's not healthy. They're basically caveman pills because they don't actually take care of the root of the issue. Because a lot of times people, I call them caveman because they're just. I mean, we expect so much from modern medicine,
Indeed.
but really they don't know why hair loss happens. I mean,
Yeah.
guys can have super high DHT, and it's like no problem.
Right.
So, anyways, I'm gonna take. So I got back on that, and so I know it's an unhealthy medication. I am, with a 5-AR,
Mm-hmm.
I'm lower in progesterone, lower in allopregnanolone, and among
Exactly.
other neurosteroids and whatever. And so I know it's ideal to not take it,
Right.
but I would rather keep my hair.
I feel you.
And I've had some side effects from finasteride.
Mm-hmm.
Some, and it especially got worse. I was really stressed out the last few months, and it was definitely noticeable. Really stressed out about my health,
Right.
and I had no idea stress could be so hard on your health.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I'm back on finasteride, and so I know ideally I would be off of it, but I have been having some side effects. I guess some just
Mm-hmm.
classic hypogonadism type side effects.
Mm.
Nothing terrible.
What are you
Um,
noticing?
um, like classic, like lower libido,
Yeah.
not as strong erections. Just not as satisfying sex life.
Right.
And I mean, doing Kegels and getting sunlight, doing everything healthy is
Mm-hmm.
pretty much made it more manageable. But I was wondering what your experience is with anyone else around who has been using, because I just started the enclomiphene
Mm-hmm.
a couple days ago, so I don't know, you know, exactly how I'm going to feel
Right.
because I just started. I don't know, and it takes
Right.
a month or two. So I'm wondering what your experience is on basically I know, like I said, ideally I'd be off finasteride and I probably wouldn't have to worry about enclomiphene. And my side effects pretty much went away when I stopped finasteride for those few months. Um, so I'm wondering what's going on to compensate. You know what I mean? Like I know it's mainly testosterone, but I know testosterone can have more of a calming. You're more calm. You're more confident.
Right.
Higher sex drive, and so I wanted to get your thoughts as the expert on this situation I find myself in where I'm doing enclomiphene and finasteride. Like, how do those two cancel out as far as benefits and drawbacks of both medications?
Have you gone back on the finasteride lately?
Yes, I've been on it for the last. I was off of it from October to January,
Yeah,
so like 3 months, and I've been back on it since January.
that makes sense. And you're taking what, 1 milligrams oral?
Yeah, 1 milligram daily. I mean, I've been doing some microneedling. I want to get my hair back to the full density I had before I stopped.
Yeah,
Before I start messing with lower, I want to make sure I can have more breathing room again with my hair before I start trying to figure out. Like I maybe 3 times a week I hear works for some people, maybe every other day. So I'm doing just the full milligram every day and
yeah,
hopefully work down. But
that makes
that's my
sense.
regimen.
Well, I appreciate the summary, and just to fill everyone else who's listening in on this who may not be as familiar with finasteride. So finasteride, aka brand name Propecia, is the only FDA approved prescription medication for androgenic alopecia, or what's commonly known as male pattern baldness. There is also minoxidil, brand name Rogaine, but that's not prescription. You can buy it over the counter at any pharmacy, and those are really like the big two, medications, along with maybe over the counter ketoconazole shampoo, which is available over the counter in 1%, prescription 2%. They're often in like hair loss discussion forums considered the big three kind of staples that people use. So what you're referring to is PFS, post-finasteride syndrome, which is a documented clinical phenomenon. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. If you look at actually the research literature, it's relatively rare, like really on the order of like 1% of people ever report actually having post-finasteride syndrome, because it gets a lot of hullabaloo, but it doesn't seem, when you systematically study it, to be very common. Now, maybe that the folks that happen are especially loud and vocal online, because it is kind of devastating in that when people come off of the finasteride, the symptoms still seem to linger, right? And that's unusual because most medication, once you come off of it, if you are having side effects, the side effects obviously remit. But with finasteride, at least post-finasteride syndrome, it doesn't seem to be the case. Now, is that because of finasteride? There was a recent paper that did show some epigenetic changes in response to taking finasteride. So that's kind of a emerging hypothesis, I would call it, that maybe there is some actual physiological changes down to the epigenetic level that may be responsible for the enduring sort of post-finasteride syndrome. The other alternative hypothesis is that it's really psychogenic, meaning that maybe it did temporarily cause side effects, and then when people come off of it, they're so anxious and stressed about it that may be perpetuating it, right? It's almost like a mind-body thing. Now, here's the answer. We don't really know, and maybe the truth is somewhere in between. I will say anecdotally, I've talked to clients, people that I know who have experienced post-finasteride syndrome. And so I think, one, it actually may be more common than is characterized in the research literature, even though, like I say, people always ask my opinion about, finasteride, and I say, look, there is a risk of post-finasteride syndrome. It's relatively rare in the research literature. It's 1 to 2%, but there's been lawsuits about it. There's kind of legal warnings. In fact, our lawyers, when we're just considering, offering it, they were like, you got to like literally put a warning label on this because of this stuff. And we're like, it's not kind of in line with the safety profile of the medications that we like to sell. But it is a risk factor, and it sounds like you've experienced it. So, I mean, look, I obviously take you at your word. When people experience symptoms, to me, it doesn't matter if it's placebo, psychogenic, due to the medications, due to other factors. You got to be safe and you got to be careful about stuff like that. And obviously, as a young man, your virility, your vitality, your sexual function are really important. And this is the terrible trade-off that unfortunately we don't have better medications out there. So a lot of guys are stuck between, do I risk obviously, ruining my sexual function versus keeping my hair? And like, what a terrible choice that is to have to pick between those two things. So
terribly ironic because it helps to have your hair to be out in the dating scene.
Exactly.
So you keep your hair, get more dates, but side effects.
So here are my thoughts on it. I in particular am not a fan, because I always make the analogy that just as testosterone replacement therapy shuts down your testosterone, obviously finasteride and other 5-AR inhibitors shut down your DHT. And I think people underappreciate the role of DHT. Because one, to your point, we're not even really sure how responsible it is for hair loss. It may be in genetically predisposed folks. It could exacerbate an underlying thing. But it depends on what else it's all the other hormones, right? There's an alternative hypothesis that really it's estrogen or estradiol that's driving, hair loss. Now we do know in enclomiphene it doesn't really seem to negatively affect the hair in terms of contributing to hair loss because unlike TRT, the DHT to T ratio is maintained in enclomiphene. So even if DHT goes up a little bit, it's going up at the same rate as testosterone. So it's maintaining at least the balance between the androgenic hormones. And so it doesn't seem to cause the typical hair loss that you do see with testosterone. But my point of view is, look, DHT is kind of the virility hormone, as Dr. Rand McClain likes to call it. It's responsible for your drive, your aggression, your libido. And so shutting it down to sub-physiological levels, which is exactly what finasteride does, especially at 1 milligram dosages. Now, here's the thing. You mentioned lower dosages. There is this, it's not really well characterized in the literature. I believe there have been studies measuring dosages as low as like 0.25 milligrams a day, if I'm not mistaken. You can always, I generally think it's a useful principle of pharmacology to try to take the minimal effective dose. You want to lower your DHT to the point that obviously doesn't mess with your libido or your sex drive or function, and obviously maintains as much of the hair maintenance benefits of it as you can. So you can take a look at the literature. I don't think it makes a huge difference. I think I've looked at it and it's going to suppress your DHT either way. So it doesn't mean like if you take a quarter of the dose, it's going to suppress it by a quarter. That's not how pharmacokinetics work, right? Even it's a very, very potent medication. Even the quarter dosage, or if you take it every second or third day, it's still going to result in probably 80% of the suppression that you're experiencing, even with the 1 milligram. The difference, though, then is, look, it's probably going to be effective for hair maintenance if it is effective at all at whatever dose that you take. That obviously you can reasonably do. So, but you can self-experiment on obviously consult with your doctor or your prescribing physician about this at seeing if a different dosage potentially reduces any sort of sexual side effects that you experience. The thing that I always really recommend is journal, right? So like if you're taking 1 milligrams a day now, like literally wake up every day and be like, did I have morning wood? How was my libido every day? Just 1 to 10 scale. Really keep it simple. Like, okay, my libido was a 5 today, and track that over the week or two that you're taking 1 milligram. And you want a nice enough sample size. And then you can start experimenting. Be like, all right, let me take it every other day, or let me cut it in half with the pill cutter. Do I notice a difference, right? Was my libido a 5 on the 1 milligram, and now all of a sudden it's a 9? Is it a pretty drastic, meaningful difference? Now, obviously there's a potential placebo effect with some of this stuff, but there's really nice things you can do called ABA case-controlled studies, which is just a fancy word for turn it on, turn it off, right? So let's take your case here. Go on 1 milligrams for a couple weeks, document your libido. Go on half a milligram for a couple weeks, document your libido. And then go back on 1 milligram. And then if you see it's been a 555, 999, 555, then you have pretty good evidence from doing the ABA test that maybe that half a milligram really is better for your sexual function because it went up and then it went back down once you stopped it, right? And that reduces but not eliminates entirely the possibility of placebo effect. And so really it's like self-experimentation. Now again, do it under physician supervision, talk to them about this. But I think most physicians are generally okay with this concept as long as you're tracking it and obviously communicating that to your prescribing provider. So that's honestly the only way that I know to kind of mitigate finasteride related side effects is to just try to find the minimum effective dose. Now, we don't know, honestly, you can't really tell if there's going to be a difference between half a milligram and a milligram for hair loss because it's hard to tell with thinning unless you're like almost OCD about tracking how much hair you're catching in a little net in your sink. I honestly cannot tell the difference on any of this stuff. You just hope long term that it's working. But sexual side effects you can definitely notice just on a day-to-day basis. So I would say optimize for minimizing side effects rather than optimizing for hair because I don't even think you can really tell the difference. But you can obviously tell the difference if you're noticing that. So that's what I would suggest is try to find that minimum effective dose for finasteride if you are going to do that. So that's possibility number one. Obviously, there is an alternative 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, which is dutasteride. It is stronger, right? And obviously, it can be worse for some folks. So if that's the case, maybe it doesn't work for you. I do tell people there's no difference between topical finasteride and oral finasteride in that
Right.
there's
It's
the
all systemic.
it goes systemic. You've heard me say that before, but I'm just saying it for everyone else.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
so yeah, and I'm really glad you're astute about the neurosteroid changes because that's the one thing that I think is a little bit tricky. So let's talk about that. Um, you can somewhat mitigate that effect, but not entirely, right? Like once you're blocking 5-AR, it's not letting the conversion between sort of these neurosteroids happen in the cascade. Now you can supplement with pregnenolone, which is sort of the grandmother hormone that turns into progesterone and turns into all the other hormones. Now, I'm not giving medical advice here, but obviously consult with your, prescribing physician about that. You can purchase it over the counter. The one thing I should just say with over the counter supplements, especially over the counter weirdly hormones like pregnenolone, which are strangely not prescription in the U.S. They are prescription actually in other countries. Is make sure you buy it from a really really reputable brand because the quality and dosing is really off with even stuff like melatonin. They've done studies, which is also a hormone, that you have no idea the dosage that you're taking when you're buying an over-the-counter supplement. So just buy it from a really good brand. The tricky thing with pregnenolone is the dosing is very unclear because the oral bioavailability is poor. So I actually prefer sublingual, either like a oral dissolving tablet or drops, and start really conservatively. Typically 5 milligrams for most healthy young men is a reasonable dose of pregnenolone that shouldn't cause any sleep or insomnia issues. And essentially, you're backfilling the neurosteroid pathway so that if you are getting a detriment in terms of your pregnenolone and progesterone, you're making sure that you're getting enough. And obviously, eating any cholesterol rich foods, which is the great grandmother, essentially, it's the precursor to pregnenolone, will make sure that you're getting enough. Now, we don't know if necessarily that's going to trickle through because of where 5-alpha reductase is inhibiting sort of that pathway, but at least you're backfilling it as much as you can. I don't think it necessarily negates essentially completely what's happening with finasteride, but it may possibly reduce some of the cognitive effects that some people do experience in terms of brain fog is a very commonly reported symptom on finasteride. So, that's what I would do personally if I was taking finasteride. I don't. But if I was, I'd want to make sure I'm backfilling those neurosteroid pathways and taking the minimal effective dose that minimizes any sexual side effects. And then honestly, just doing a cost benefit analysis. I would say that, look, if you're maintaining a lot of healthy hair, and you're not noticing huge declines in hair loss, if you're experiencing serious sexual side effects from finasteride, you're one of the unlucky people that is experiencing post-finasteride syndrome, it may not be the right medication for you. I don't have a problem with finasteride if you're side effect free, but if you're actually experiencing side effects, I'm like, I don't know. You got to make that personal decision for you. But I would say if that was the case, I would try to maintain your sexual functioning by not being on the medication. If that was me. And then just try to find alternative solutions. So obviously, like minoxidil, even though it's not, a godsend, for most people, it doesn't cause too many side effects. Does have some mild beneficial effects. And we are actually launching our own non-DHT blocking hair and beard growth formula. It's going to be launched end of Q3. So I know that's not like super, super soon, but we will have something in the market that will help this as well.
Sure. And do you have anything to speak about the compensating on anything with enclomiphene, like?
Yeah, so it works through a different mechanism of action, right? So enclomiphene doesn't negate the effects of finasteride because here's what's going to happen: your testosterone and DHT will rise probably concomitantly on enclomiphene, but the DHTs actually, well, normally would rise on enclomiphene, but because you're taking finasteride, a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, it's inhibiting the conversion of testosterone to DHT. So what happens when you take both medications is your testosterone will rise, your DHT will still be low. So it can't compensate for the decrease in DHT because it's blocking the pathway through which DHT is created. Now, some people would argue maybe that's the best of both worlds. You get high testosterone, low DHT, at least in terms of maintaining your hair. So it can be an effective combination for most people, but the enclomiphene itself is not going to negate essentially what the finasteride is doing. So unlike, well, maybe pregnenolone and other things sort of can. So yeah, I would say if it works for you, and obviously your prescribing physicians, whoever you're getting those drugs from, agree, it can be a helpful combination of trying to find a balance between testosterone optimization and hair, maintenance. Um, but they're they don't cancel each other out, so to speak.
Okay, yeah, sure. Because I was just thinking maybe I know there's no substitute for just not taking finasteride,
Yeah.
but just like kind of compensating for any issues from finasteride with testosterone. So, yeah, this is good though. I've got some ideas to try out. Um,
Yeah.
with pregnetyl, and I have some of that.
So yeah, it's not perfect. I think the way you should think about all drugs and supplements is everything's cost benefit, right? And that really does vary for each individual. And the thing that I always encourage is that's why I say journal, journal, journal. Like document what the benefits are for you. Like, are you noticing a decrease in shedding? Obviously, document the side effects, and then you make that personal choice. I don't think there's a wrong choice. Obviously, outside of a gross harm that you're harming yourself, but we all have to make these sort of trade-offs, and really people respond differently. So for every person, it's going to be different. So, but I think you're thinking about it in the right way, experimentally, systematically. You're obviously very knowledgeable about it, and you're learning more. And I appreciate you calling and let us know how it goes.
Sure, great. Well, thank you. And I guess I'll just bounce from this and let the next person on, right?
Thank you. Yep. So yeah, we can follow up. Feel free to call in on a future radio show. Follow up on our Discord, and then obviously whenever we launch our hair and beard growth product, I can definitely have you come off of finasteride if you and your physician likes, and switch to our protocol.
Great. Thank you very much. Have
All
a
right,
good one.
man. Take care. I don't think there's actually anyone in. Oh, let's say Robert Lettuce wants to be in this live video. Maybe we can go live with him. Unable to join. All right, we had a question from Instagram Live. Could you talk about the vitamin provided with the protocol, MK4 versus MK7, and 10,000 IU's vitamin D, benefits, risks? So yes, I'm happy to talk about it. So the Maximus King Protocol features both a prescription pharmaceutical medication, which is enclomiphene that we were just talking about, and also includes a pharmaceutical grade supplement. That supplement, now I always say supplements don't increase testosterone unless you have a really underlying deficiency, and even then, it's not going to dramatically increase your testosterone. All it's going to do is take your testosterone to where it should have been if you didn't have like a vitamin D deficiency. Which, by the way, anyone who lives above the San Francisco, New York, Athens latitude is deficient in vitamin D. Even down here in sunny LA, we actually did a validation study. 66% of guys were vitamin D deficient, 100% were suboptimal who were not supplementing. So that's the purpose of the supplement, is to make sure that you don't have any nutritional deficiencies that may be impairing the efficacy of the enclomiphene, which is really like the heart of the King protocol. So we do use 10,000 IU's of vitamin D. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's really high, but it's actually not. We've done testing, and the recommended doses of vitamin D are based on historical artifacts and literally errors. Like, I don't know where these recommendations of taking like 400, 500 IU come from, but that doesn't move the needle at all. Even 5,000 IU's for most people does not necessarily get them from a deficient, if they're actually deficient range, into an optimal range. So generally below 30, I believe, nanograms per deciliter, if I'm getting the units right, is considered deficient, and above, let's say 45 to 60, depending on who you ask, is considered optimal. There was recently actually a study related to COVID arguing that if everyone's level was above 50, almost nobody would have essentially severe COVID that requires a hospitalization, which is because it has this very profound immunoprotective effect when your vitamin D is optimal. So we generally find 10,000 IU's of vitamin D ensures that almost everyone is in the optimal range, and it's actually very hard to overdose on vitamin D. That is actually within the top of the upper tolerable recommended limit or intake of it. So it's a very actually safe dose for most people, as long as you're not getting vitamin D from any other supplement. We do tell people, like, get off your multivitamin. It's probably cheap and crap anyway, and take ours instead. And then we combine that with vitamin K. Vitamin D and vitamin K are very complementary. They should be taken together to make sure that the calcium is going to your bones, not your arteries. And we use vitamin K2. There's different forms of vitamin K2, which includes MK7 and MK4. In the end, I had a discussion with Dr. Barry Tan, who's one of the world's experts on it. All of the forms of vitamin K, whether it's K1, K2, MK4, K2, MK7, they all convert to MK4 in the body because that's the form that the body prefers and uses. So they just require different dosages. MK7 is probably the most potent of the vitamin Ks. You only need about 100 to 200 micrograms. With vitamin MK4, you need a higher dosage, probably between 500 micrograms to a milligram. And then with K1, which is sort of the plant-based version of vitamin K, you probably want 1, maybe 2 milligrams of it. But you often see supplements, including ours, that use different forms of it. And that way it ensures you're kind of covering all your bases and it's all trickling down to the same effect, and making sure that it has that benefit in terms of balancing out the vitamin D. But vitamin K on its own actually seems to have some potential testosterone supporting effects. Like I said, it's not going to increase testosterone on its own, but there's lots of in vitro and rat studies that actually do show significant increases in testosterone, as it's one of the key sort of precursors for steroidogenesis, or the production of testosterone. And so it's included in our protocol along with vitamins A. So it's vitamins A, D, E, K, and GG, geranol, which is one of the chains of vitamin K that's responsible for steroidogenesis. And we use a very special form of vitamin E, which is the tocotrienol form discovered by Dr. Barry Tan, which does a better job of absorbing free radicals, reducing oxidative damage. And vitamin E is known to support fertility, and so it may actually potentially have some synergistic effects with the enclomiphene in terms of increasing your LH, which is the precursor to your testosterone. So we offer that as our proprietary supplement to help support our King Protocol. We're actually really excited. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to launch an even better version of it that includes magnesium, a very special form of it, magnesium acetyltaurate, which is the best absorbed form in your brain. Includes copper, includes zinc, includes a B vitamin complex, and includes saffron, which is actually one of the rare herbal supplements that I'm a fan of. There's a ton of literature showing its mood-supporting benefits, including in the treatment of depression, and attention-focusing effects. It actually shows effects comparable to Ritalin in randomized controlled trials in terms of the treatment of ADHD. So it's very good for mood and focus, and has literally obviously been used in traditional Middle Eastern and Persian cuisine and medicine for thousands of years. So we are actually including a low-dose standardized form of saffron in that extract as well. So we'll keep you in the loop in terms of the launch of that supplement. You can't buy it on its own. It's going to be only available if you're on one of our protocols, such as the King Protocol.
We had a question from a protocol user via YouTube. Question regarding enclomiphene. Is there an advantage to using a larger dose 3 times a week rather than every day? Blocking the estrogen receptors in the brain, can it be good for everyday use? I was thinking of 25 milligrams 3 times a week, or perhaps between 12.5 to 25 milligrams 3 times a week. I was on the protocol for 30 days, but didn't feel any better, so maybe I didn't stay on it long enough. However, I am 44. I did abuse steroids in the past, but I feel better when my estradiol has been in mid to high of normal range in the past.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's no literature on this, unfortunately, right? There's been speculation that sort of every other day dosing is better than daily dosing because, lets kind of the enclomiphene wash out of your system. Enclomiphene has a half-life of about 10 and a half hours. So basically after half a day, it's not blocking the receptors. Now, the effect still perpetuates. Even if you take like literally 1 dose of enclomiphene, half of it will be out of your system in 10 and a half hours. That's the definition of a half-life. But the testosterone boosting effects, because it's stimulating your LH and FSH, will actually perpetuate for days. So generally, within probably a week after you stop taking enclomiphene, you'll still actually have the testosterone boosting effects that happen. Now, obviously, that will go back to normal too once the body realizes that, okay, it's 100% out of my system, LH and FSH drop, and now things are back to normal. So the question is it better to take every other day dosing? So here's my answer to that. Pharmacologically, we don't know. It may be for some folks. Some people experiment with that. I have seen other clinicians, but we prefer not to do it. And the reason for that is twofold. One, if you just think about sort of your body's own natural rhythm, it doesn't surge your hormone on Monday and then take a vacation on Tuesday, come back and surge your hormone on Wednesday, take a vacation on Thursday. It's really not bioidentical to do this kind of like every other day pulse dosing. Now the body does do pulses, but the pulses are typically shorter rhythms. They're like 90 to 120 minutes, for instance, in which GnRH pulses in your brain to produce LH and FSH. It's not like every other day for the most part. So one, I don't really think it mimics essentially what the body naturally does. And I think it kind of throws the body off to like have high testosterone one day and then, it's kind of fluctuating a little bit. Now, like I said, the testosterone boosting effects, if you probably measured your testosterone while taking enclomiphene every other day, will probably actually stay high throughout the week. But you are getting more of that blip, the more of the peak, so to speak, on the days that you take it. If you think about it, this is actually the issue that TRT users have, right? They don't typically inject every day because it's kind of literally a pain in the ass to inject yourself. So they'll inject themselves usually 1 to 2 times a week. The downside, of course, of that is, well, right after your injection, your testosterone's sky high, so you may be feeling good, or actually maybe feeling more side effects because it's too high. And then by the end of the week, right before you take your next shot, you're feeling kind of low because your testosterone levels have dipped. And so that's the downside of any injectable, is it doesn't have optimal frequency unless you're taking some very long-lasting drug or ester, essentially. Now with enclomiphene, because it's an oral pill, you can vary it based on, whenever you want to take it. But I generally am a fan of everyday dosing, or QD dosing, as pharmacists like to say, because it reduces the likelihood of forgetting. The problem with every other day dosing, because we also, in particular in society, have a 7-day work week, you're not taking it on the same day every week. Literally, by definition, every other week, you're taking it on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The next week, you're taking it Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And then you're like, did I take it? Did I not take it? So unless you're like one of those old people that has your pills marked out by the day of the week, it's really easy to forget if you took it or not. And then you end up doing wonky dosing because you're inconsistent about it. So from a behaviorist standpoint, I'm like, it's very easy to remember to take your one pill every single day at the same time, which is, in the morning, ideally, with breakfast if you're taking the vitamin D with it. And so I think any time that you're consistent, it's going to probably be better. So even though it's possible that the every other day dosing could be better for some folks, I just think from a compliance perspective, it's inferior. And so we focus on everyday dosing. So yeah, sorry to hear that it didn't provide as much of the benefits as you wanted. To your point, yeah, your past history obviously with steroid or anabolic androgenic steroid use may be a factor in that. Or who knows what else. Maybe you didn't find the right dose. But if you'd like to try again, happy to do so. Like I said, we are launching that new supplement, and so particularly. By the way, I think that's one of the challenges with this protocol. I mean, it's like it's not a psychoactive drug, right? People, I think, sometimes have unrealistic expectations for what feeling it means. It's not caffeine. It's not Adderall. You're not going to feel it in terms of a clear, immediate benefit. And that's a good thing, because stuff that immediately makes you feel different tends to be addictive and create dependence issues. And enclomiphene, fortunately, doesn't, right? You can discontinue it at any time without any discontinuation syndrome. But I will say, for instance, for the folks that are trying to feel a little bit more energy, the new supplement that comes with the King Protocol has niacin, has B vitamins in their superior forms, such as vitamin P5P, which is the correct form of vitamin B6 used. Unlike Andrew Soiberman, who recommended vitamin B6 without specifying the right type, you would go and buy generic vitamin B6, which can cause nerve issues and neuropathy in the 120 to 200 milligram dosage that he recommended, and I corrected and called him out on. We use the correct form, which nobody should recommend that you take vitamin B6 without taking the correct form, which is P5P. So I can't guarantee it, but it may be that if you retry the protocol with the new supplement, you might feel the energy boosting effects of the B vitamins and the niacin a little bit more than our old supplement, which did not have these things.
Customer commented, "Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Dr. Kemp."
Absolutely. Were there any other questions?
We had one more question. This first one, serious question. Ever since starting the King Protocol, I've noticed my pubic hair growth has been significantly less. Is this normal? However, I am feeling great and loving the protocol.
First time I've heard that. As I mentioned, the enclomiphene will increase testosterone and DHT at the same rate. DHT does have an influence in body hair production, which includes, pubic hair, beard hair, body hair. And so some people usually will might notice a slight increase. It'd be unusual to notice a decrease. So it's the first time I heard of that. It doesn't really mechanistically make sense. So I'm guessing it's probably not due to that. But who knows? There's always weird individual variability. So I would say it may not be due to that, but anything is possible. I don't think that's particularly cumbersome. I actually suggest most guys trim their hair, whether it's pubic hair, armpit hair, body hair. It's probably better for, your hygiene and your partner. So maybe it's not a bad thing. We did have a question from Instagram about, looks like a 36-year-old was asking about taking 50 milligrams of DHEA a day for a 36-year-old male. I'm not a fan of DHEA, actually. A lot of people just take it willy-nilly when you really shouldn't take it unless you've had your DHEA sulfate levels, which is the more reliable marker of it, measured. Now, if you've had a blood test, your DHEA sulfate levels are low, then sure, under a doctor's supervision, you can supplement it to get it back into a normal range. But every time I've talked to someone taking DHEA, I ask them, have you had your levels measured? Were they low? Nobody does. So you're just kind of taking it as you take any other supplement, but it's a hormone, and it's, like I said, it's a weird thing that's even legal in the US to just be able to go into a Whole Foods and buy hormones. But it is what it is, just like melatonin. And so, you don't want to take it willy-nilly. 50 milligrams is a substantial dose. And here's the problem. When men take DHEA, it's one of the hormones at the top of the steroidal chain or cascade, and a lot of it converts to estrogen or estradiol. So you're likely increasing your estrogen or estradiol, which you don't want to do as a man, by supplementing DHEA unless you know you're deficient in it. So I would say for most guys, I actually definitely do not recommend DHEA because of the risk of increasing your estrogen or estradiol, which you don't want in excess. It's a Goldilocks thing. You don't want too little, you don't want too much. So if you don't know you have too little, you don't want to be supplementing and getting too much, because we know that having excess estradiol messes guys up. It often causes mood issues, libido issues, and obviously in very high amounts can cause the development of male breast tissue gynecomastia. So be careful about supplementing hormones, especially over the counter, especially without a doctor's supervision, because I think a lot of guys, you can literally walk into a Whole Foods, buy it, and not be aware of the side effect that I just mentioned. So be careful, and I would say unless you have lab testing to justify it and a doctor is supervising your usage of it, I don't recommend it for most folks.
JC commented, "You're right, probably something environmental. Thank you for answering. I don't mind the side effect, and neither does my wife," about the pubic hair. Well, not side effect, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And
indeed.
we had another customer actually comment just in. "I've been on the medication 18 days and have already seen positive effects. I'm 56 and never tried steroids or TRT. I wish I would have found this 10 years ago. How long can you stay on the medication?"
Yeah, thank you very much for the comment. I'm glad that you're finding benefits 18 days in. I'd love to hear, by the way, what you notice, because sometimes people say they notice it, sometimes people don't. So I'm curious what you've noticed so far. Feel free to type that in YouTube. But really, it's designed for indefinite use. Now, there are studies of the parent compound Clomid that has been used in healthy young men for years without significant adverse effects. It doesn't seem to build a tolerance, meaning you don't necessarily need to take more and more to get the same effect. There's no dependence on it in that there's no withdrawal symptoms that you get if you discontinue it. And so, really, it seems to be a relatively safe medication. There doesn't seem to be any indication of like significant down regulation of other systems as well, unlike TRT, which clearly creates suppression, right? And so, really, as far as we know, at least based on the multi-year studies, it's at least safe to take for years, and likely safe to take forever. I'm on the protocol. I certainly intend on taking it for the rest of my life, until maybe there's something even better. But for the time being, I think it's the best in class medication and the best kept secret in medicine, quite frankly, on the market. And really, so the answer to the question is, as long as the cost benefit is positive for you and your physician agree that you're getting good benefit, minimal side effects, and it's worth the trade off, then absolutely you should continue to take it for as long as it benefits and serves you.
I had a question. Why is the protocol not well known?
Because it wasn't around 10 years ago, to your point. I wish if you looked into this 10 years ago, it literally wasn't available. It's only been, the drug has only been available recently, and then we obviously just launched the protocol as of August 2021. So you're literally on the cutting edge in terms of, the latest and greatest. And so it's becoming more popular, though. We just actually had a article in GQ magazine on testosterone therapies transforming aging. Just Google GQ Maximus, or you can check it out. I linked to it on my Twitter. And so, we've had a rush of people come in and sign up for our program because the word is getting out. And they interviewed two of our current members, including Chris Jones, who literally 2.8x'd, almost tripled his levels in the protocol. And I even learned something new. He's working with an athletic trainer to increase his hops and increase his vertical leap by 8 inches. I was like, that's amazing, right? Now, it's not just due to the medication, it's that and training, but it does increase strength and it increases the benefits of physical training. And so it's really cool to even be able to quantify in that way.
ST commented, yeah, the benefits I have seen is enhanced libido, increased morning wood almost every day, feeling more inspired, and working out like a beast. And JC commented, he actually was suffering from severe ADHD anxiety that led to depression and a lack of drive. And within 8 days on the protocol, he felt a legit and new, better version of himself. I will never look back from the protocol. Hashtag life changing.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Victor should follow up with you. Make sure that you guys have written reviews, by the way. If you haven't gone on trustpilot.com, do me a huge personal favor. Just go on trustpilot.com, type in maximustribe.com, and if you could write, your testimonial, it's obviously it benefits us as a company, but honestly, it's for other folks like you. Just like the guy who said, I wish I would have heard about this 10 years ago. There's a lot of guys out there. They're sitting on the fence. They're like, is this company legit? Is this snake oil? And I don't blame them. There's a lot of snake oil out there. But hopefully, me as a medical school professor, the other medical school professors who are on our advisory board who are smarter and more established than I am, two of whom have literally written the textbooks on testosterone, obviously vouch for the safety and efficacy of our protocol. But a lot of people obviously want to hear it from folks like you who are like on the protocol themselves. Is it working for them? How is it #life-changing? And I think that really convinces people to join. So help out your fellow brother, your fellow man, and write those Trustpilot reviews. All right, we have our last caller of the day. Two of whom have literally written the textbooks on that. Hello.
Hey, Dr. Kim.
How's it going? Got a repeat guest on the Maximus Live podcast.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, so I've been on like 2 months, and I was originally on TRT, and
That's
I
right.
really felt the benefits. But after about 6 months, I got bad adult acne in my shoulders and my face.
Yeah.
And while that's gone away, which has been a big one,
Yeah, I was gonna
my
say your
energy.
skin looks really smooth.
Yeah, thanks, man. My wife helped out with that too, with her creams and magic elixirs. But
Love it.
my energy though is like really low, and they doubled. I want to say about 20 days ago to
12 and a half.
12.5. Yeah, 12 and a half. And there's other stuff, like we're in the middle of IVF, fertility stuff,
Yeah.
and there's personal things, see a therapist, things. But I'm like, it's really, really low. So I just, as I was listening, messaged the elation doctor.
Yeah.
Just let him know because I'm supposed to do my blood click tests next week.
Yep.
Any advice on that transition? Because on TRT, I was like in the gym pushing weight. I still go now. Not as bad. I felt like I kind of leveled out. But any thoughts on?
Yeah,
I
I noticed you also mentioned when you were typing in your notes that you're not consuming caffeine currently.
That's been the last week. But even before my kind of giddy up, especially being an entrepreneur, has been really lacking. And then not doing the caffeine. I've had some green tea a couple times. So yeah, I'm sure that's not helping it as well.
Yeah,
But
well, that's the challenge. You're confounding two potential variables, obviously, and especially if it's only been a week. Like you can still like your body is still adapting to that. How much caffeine did you used to drink?
probably I averaged 2 cups. I think if it was a lot that day, it'd be four, but most of the time it was closer to two.
Yeah, I mean, so if you're consuming 2 to 4 cups of caffeine, your body definitely has some potential dependence on it. And it does obviously make a big difference for your energy. It's the number one consumed drug in the world. Now, I don't think there's something inherently wrong with it. Certainly, especially with like green tea, that certainly has some potential antioxidant benefits from the ECGC, the L-theanine, and the other phytonutrients that are in green tea. So, the main thing is just don't take as much that's causing any sleep issues, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something I would just say, look, you can experiment with it. Is You may have low energy, but it's certainly lower, almost certainly, because of the caffeine withdrawal and deprivation that you're experiencing. Now, you can make a choice about whether you want to continue to do that because you just don't want to be on any stimulants. I obviously don't use any because I tell people like it just makes me really anxious, so I don't do
Yeah.
well on them. But other folks, they're not only fine, they're better, quite frankly, on 1 to 2 cups of tea or coffee a day. And in that dosage range, especially if it's first thing in the morning, may not affect sleep. You obviously kind of build a tolerance of some of the side effects. And I don't know, there's maybe some, at least with filtered coffee and good teas, some potential health benefits as well. So I think the question is like, what do you want to do with caffeine? Do you want to not be on it forever, or you just want to take a lower dose?
Yeah, and that's that even how I should say, I even before I wasn't on caffeine, I was even like after in the afternoon, it was kind of like that lull,
Yeah.
and I was not feeling. No, I was feeling pretty good on the TRT, but the acne was kind of like,
Yeah.
let me try Maximus. Should I? And there's some other people saying 18 days and I felt it, or 8 days and I felt it, and I haven't felt it, and that was even when I was on
It
caffeine.
totally varies. Some people don't feel it. Some people feel it within a day, and everything in between. So that's not a function of the medication. It's a function of your individual physiology. Some people are even just like more astute to their body, and some people aren't. And it also
Yeah,
depends on where you're starting. And people I think who are starting lower feel it more. If you're already pretty normal and healthy, you're not going to feel super healthy. You know what I mean? It's like you're
sure.
not lacking in a symptom. So I wouldn't stress too much about that. The other question though is, are there other stuff going on? You did mention there's obviously a lot of life things, but like, how's your sleep?
It's okay. That's another thing that I've never really been. I have an aura ring, and
Yeah.
it tells me that I'll toss and turn.
So
Um,
how much sleep are you averaging, or what's your sleep score with the Aura?
it's usually in the 70s. I'm in bed for 8.5 hours most nights, but in terms of actual sleep, that it says it's usually closer to seven, less.
Okay. That's not bad. I mean, like
Yeah.
7 to 9 is within the recommended range. How do you feel when you wake up though? Are you like
Yeah,
tired? Are you
that's what you're talking
energized?
about. the journaling, and I was even tracking, the erection, the energy. Like, I definitely don't want to get out of bed. I work for myself, so I don't have to like run and jump out, which is a double-edged sword. But yeah, most like today we got up at 5 to go to the gym, my wife and I. But if she was like, "Hey, let's sleep in," I'd be like, "Okay." And so my it's not like I'm dead tired, but it's also not like, all right, let's get up and go do things. It's a chore.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean, I have a couple thoughts. One, stress and cortisol is an energy killer. And it sounds like you got a lot of stress in your life right now. There's obviously no easy solution for that. That's complex and multifactorial, but it is something, an area I would say you might want to focus a little bit more on addressing. Because no matter how much your testosterone is optimal, even your sleep, if your cortisol is through the roof, and even your psychological perception of stress is very high, it's tiring, right? Because your body's in fight or flight mode all day. And even though acute stress is good, like in terms of let me not get run over when I cross the street, you don't want to be in chronic stress all day because the tiger is chasing the gazelle for a minute a day. It's not doing it for 12, 16 hours a day like when we experience chronic stress. So I would say that may be a factor. And it sounds like it may be a little bit more so lately. So that's possibility number one that area number one that you might want to work on. Number two is let's get your results, your blood results back on 12 and a half and look at how much you've increased. Did you get results back on the 6.25 in terms of how it affected your testosterone?
I don't think so. I've only taken one blood prick.
Oh, okay. So if you've just done it before, then obviously wait until you've been on 12 and a half long enough. So yeah, that's why, because you're waiting for the new dosage to see what you're after is. Yeah. So let's take a look at your levels. I think that's going to be a big determinant of it. If even the 12 and a half doesn't boost it enough, you could go up to 25 milligrams. There are some folks who take the highest dose because maybe they need it more, or if you were suppressed for a long time on TRT, you may in particular need more. But I think you have to look at your levels before making that choice and jumping to that. And also it hasn't been enough time. You just switched to the 12 and a half. Yeah. Give it a little bit more time, obviously, for your body to get used to the newer dose. And then that may be helpful. Third possibility to look into is, do you take any other supplements or vitamins?
I have adrenal NRG from a naturopath, and then I was taking zinc, and then sometimes I haven't done it in like probably 2 weeks. Just bad habit.
So our new supplement, which will hopefully come out in the next couple of weeks, will take care of some of this for you. But basically, like B vitamins are particularly helpful for energy. So we include vitamins B1, B2, B5, B6, and B12, I believe. And like I said, we use the better forms of it. Unfortunately, like I would say 80 to 95% of the B supplements in the market are shitty. They use the shitty, cheap forms of all of these things when you should be using the better forms of methylfolate, quatrefolate, the P5P, B6 that I talked about, etc. So there are some better ones, but you kind of like have to really look at the labels and the ingredients. And it's really annoying for the average consumer too, because they sneak it in. Yeah. So for instance, the B6 is my litmus test for whether a vitamin B6 complex is good or not, because the good ones use P5P. But the annoying thing is companies know this and they'll use 50% of the cheap form and 50% of P5P, which is the better expensive form. And so you look at the label, you're like, oh, P5P, that's what I need. But you're like, but it's also half of it, and then you're still using the shitty half form. So the only forms that I like only use P5P. They use 100% P5P, and those are less than 5%, I would say. So if you have some patience, you can wait for us to release our supplement in the next couple weeks, or in the short term, you can buy like a 30-day dose of a good B complex. So B complex, and the other one that is really helpful is ubiquinol, which is the more bioavailable form of coenzyme Q10. Also is particularly helpful for energy. Those two really help support natural energy production, the mitochondria in your cells, which is the energy centers of your cells. And so that can be an additional booster or approach. Our supplement will include the B complex. It will not include ubiquinol because it's a liquid essentially, and you have to take that separately. So you can always experiment with those, obviously in consultation with your doctor. Not providing medical advice here, but generally those are helpful supplements for people who have energy.
Well, I was taking I think a vitamin B complex shot in tandem with my TRT that I just stopped doing after. So now that's kind of a
I don't think you need to do the shots. Honestly, I think they like selling those things. The oral bioavailability of B vitamins is pretty good. Just take the pills, in my opinion, and obviously you avoid another injection. So, all right, we are at time, but thank you for the solid questions. Feel free to follow up with me, obviously, on the Discord community. And good to see you, and your skin looking radiant. So, I mean, look, that's one benefit you've gotten already.
Thanks, man.
All right, take care. All right, everyone, we're at time at 6 o'clock. You can always catch us next week. We're actually going to go back to our regularly scheduled time, which is Thursday at 6 o'clock to 7 p.m. Pacific time. And in the meantime, if you have any other questions, feel free to join our community. It's at maximistribe.com/Discord. I'll see you all online. Take care.